My name is Brother Corvus of the Raven Guard, 4th Company, Tactical Squad Umbra. I am a space marine, one of the Emperor's Angels of Death, gene-forged for war and enhanced beyond human limitation. I am writing this account in the margins of my operational logs, carving words into the corroded ceramite of my power armor with a broken combat knife. Because I need to remember who I was before the ship took me. Before the warp took me. Before I became lost. It began on the bridge of the battle barge Nightfall's Talon. We had been pursuing an Emperor's Children warband through the Ghoul Stars, a 3-week campaign that had seen us board and purge 2 corrupted vessels. The third ship, a desecrated strike cruiser, had led us into a region of real space that the navigator described as thin. I remember Brother Sergeant Marius voicing concern. The veil between real space and the Imperium is degraded here. We should break off pursuit. At Shrike, our company captain, present aboard the Nightfall's Talon to personally oversee the operation, refused. The trader marines must not escape. We press the attack. The Emperor's Children vessel initiated warp translation before we could close to boarding range. Captain Shrike ordered immediate pursuit. Follow them through. We cannot allow them to escape justice. The navigator, a withered man whose third eye wept constantly behind its protective bandage, protested. Captain, the warp currents here are treacherous. If we translate at these coordinates... This is an order, navigator. We translated. I was on the bridge when it happened, part of the command squad providing security for the captain. 20 Raven Guard in full battle plate, bolters ready, positioned at strategic points throughout the bridge's vast expanse. The transition into the warp began normally, the sickening lurch as reality twisted, the brief sensation of falling in all directions simultaneously, the taste of copper and ashes that always accompanied warp travel. Then the Gellar field failed. I know this because I heard the navigator's scream. Not a scream of fear, a scream of something fundamental breaking inside his mind. His third eye, the warp-sensitive organ that allowed him to perceive the Immersive, had been exposed to the raw warp without the Gellar field's protection. His head exploded, not metaphorically. His skull literally detonated from psychic overload, spraying brain matter across his navigation console. And then the bridge changed. The walls stretched. I watched ceramite and steel flow like liquid, extending upward into impossible angles that hurt to perceive. The ceiling receded into infinity while simultaneously pressing down on us. The floor rippled with geometric patterns that didn't exist in 3-dimensional space. Brother Talon, standing 3 meters to my left, pointed his bolter at the wall and fired. The mass-reactive round traveled toward its target, then curved mid-slit, executing a path through space that violated every law of physics I'd been taught. The bolt circled back and detonated against Talon's own chest, punching through his ceramite armor and detonating inside his primary heart. He fell, blood pooling beneath him in a pattern that formed screaming faces. "Gellar field compromised," someone shouted. I think it was the engineer at the power distribution console. "Warp incursion across all decks, demons manifesting in..." A tentacle as thick as my torso bursts from the engineer's mouth, tearing him open from the inside. The demon that emerged wore his skin like a coat, its form constantly shifting between impossible configurations of limbs and eyes and mouths. Captain Shrike's voice cut through the chaos with Astartes' authority. "4th Company, defensive formation. Purge the Xenos filth." We responded with the discipline of centuries. Squad Umbra moved into firing positions, bolters raised, targeting the demon that had consumed the engineer. Brother Marius led Squad Noctis to secure the bridge's primary entrance. The rest of the command squad formed a protective ring around Captain Shrike. We fired. Bolt rounds tore into the demon's shifting flesh. I watched my shots strike true. Direct hits to what appeared to be critical organs. The demon screamed, a sound that made my eardrums bleed inside my helmet and collapsed into a puddle of Technicolor ichor. The ichor spelled out words in Gothic. "You cannot kill what lodges at death." Then the puddle reformed into 12 smaller daemons, each one giggling with voices that sounded like children and broken glass. They scattered across the bridge, moving with speed that even my enhanced reflexes struggled to track. Brother Kane managed to cut one down with his combat knife. The blade had been blessed by the chapter's chaplains, and the daemon shrieked as the sanctified edge carved through it. But 2 more demons dragged Brother Severus to the ground. I watched them pull him apart, not with violence but with playful curiosity, like children dismantling a toy. They removed his arms first, setting them aside neatly. Then his legs. Then his helmet, exposing his face. Severus was still alive, his enhanced physiology refusing to let him die immediately. He screamed as the demons reached into his mouth and pulled out his gene seed, the precious implant that contained his genetic legacy. One daemon swallowed it, then vomited it back up. The gene seed had transformed into a tiny, screaming homunculus that looked like Severus. The daemons laughed and crushed it. "Fall back to secondary positions," Marius ordered. "Establish a kill zone at—" The floor opened beneath Squad Noctis. Not a mechanical failure, the floor simply ceased to exist, replaced by a chasm that extended into infinite darkness, filled with watching eyes. 6 Raven Guard fell into that abyss. I heard their screams Doppler away, stretching into eternity. The chasm closed. The floor was solid again, as if nothing had happened. Except now, there were 6 fewer of us. Captain Shrike activated his jump pack, launching himself toward the bridge's strategic command throne. "We must reach the emergency translation controls. If we can reinitiate the Geller field—" A figure stepped out of the command throne. It wore Captain Shrike's armor, bore Captain Shrike's face, moved with Captain Shrike's gait. There were 2 Captain Shrikes on the bridge. The duplicate smiled with too many teeth. "Hello, brother. I've been waiting for you. I've always been waiting for you. Don't you remember? We met here yesterday. We'll meet here tomorrow. We're meeting here now. We've never stopped meeting here." Captain Shrike, the real one, I desperately wanted to believe, raised his bolt pistol and fired 3 rounds into the duplicate's head. The duplicate caught all 3 bolts in its mouth, chewed them like food, and swallowed. Rude. I'm you, after all. Shooting me is suicide. Or is it self-defense? The warp makes philosophy so delightfully complicated. Then both Captain Shrikes attacked each other, power weapons crackling as they clashed. I couldn't tell which was real. They moved identically, fought identically, bled identically. Brother Marius grabbed my shoulder. "Corvus, we need to evacuate the bridge, rally the survivors, and—" A door appeared in the wall where no door had existed before. Through it I saw a corridor of the Nightfall's Talon. Familiar, normal, safe. Marius pushed me toward it. "Go. I'll cover your retreat." I ran. Battle Brothers followed. I didn't count how many. We plunged through the door into the corridor. Behind us, I heard Marius scream. I turned to look back. The bridge was gone. The door had vanished. We stood in a corridor that stretched in both directions into infinity, its walls covered with bas-relief carvings of space marines in various states of death and torment. One carving depicted Brother Marius being flayed alive by creatures with surgical precision. As I watched, the carving moved. Stone Marius screamed silently. "Where are the others?" Brother Kane asked. His voice was steady, Astartes' conditioning maintaining his composure despite the horror. I looked around. There were 5 of us who'd made it through the door. Myself, Brother Kane, Brother Ulrich, Brother Davis, and Brother Hestian. 5 survivors from a command squad of 20. "We need to reach the Enginarium," Ulrich said. His tone was tactical, focused. "If we can manually reinitiate the Geller field from the primary generators—" "The Enginarium is 17 decks below us," Davos interrupted. "Through corridors that might not exist anymore. This is the warp. Nothing here follows." The corridor twisted. I can't properly describe what happened. The space around us rotated through dimensions I don't have words for. Up became sideways, became inside out. My enhanced inner ear, calibrated to maintain balance even in zero-gravity combat, screamed conflicting information at my brain. When reality stabilized, or at least returned to something my senses could process, we were somewhere else. The corridor looked the same but felt different. The carvings on the walls depicted different deaths. The lighting came from sources that didn't exist, and at the corridor's end, perhaps 50 meters distant, stood a figure. It was humanoid but wrong. Too tall, too thin, its proportions subtly off in ways that triggered revulsion in my brain's threat assessment centers. It wore robes that might have been red or might have been made of flayed skin. Space Marines, it said, and its voice was beautiful and terrible, like angels singing hymns of damnation. Lost, little angels, fallen from the Emperor's grace. Do you know where you are? Kane raised his bolter. Identify yourself, demon. The figure laughed. Daemon. Such crude terminology. I am a citizen of the warp, a native of this realm. You are the intruders here, and you are in my home now. Where is the bridge? I demanded. Where is Captain Shrike? The bridge is everywhere and nowhere. Your captain is alive and dead and never born. You are all lost in the between spaces, the angles that don't exist in your limited reality. The figure gestured, and the corridor behind us stretched into impossible distance. Your ship translated incompletely. Part of it remains in real space. Part of it exists here, and part of it exists in times and places that haven't happened yet. Ulrich's voice was cold. You're lying, attempting to break our morale. It won't work. We are Astartes. We are doomed, the figure finished. But the doom will be exquisite. The warp has claimed you, little angels, and it will take such sweet time teaching you the futility of resistance. Kane fired. The bolter round struck the figure, center mass, detonating and tearing it apart in a spray of matter that might have been flesh. The figure reformed immediately, untouched. Rude. I was trying to help you understand your situation, but if you prefer ignorance. It vanished. The corridor began to scream. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, everything emitted a sound like a billion voices in perfect agony. The carvings came alive, stone Space Marines reaching out of the walls with pleading hands. Move, I shouted, and we ran. We ran down corridors that twisted and changed. Doors appeared and disappeared. Rooms that should have been cargo holds contained forests of crystallized blood. Chambers that should have been barracks were filled with water that flowed upward. We ran for what my armor's chronoclaimed was 47 minutes. It felt like years. When we finally stopped, collapsing in exhaustion in a chamber that resembled the Nightfall's Talon's chapel, I checked the chrono again. 47 minutes since the Gellerfield failed. But my combat stims, calibrated to last 6 hours, had been depleted. My armor's power supply, good for 72 hours of continuous operation, showed 40% depletion. Time was broken here. Brother Davos noticed it too. My metabolic indicators suggest I've been in combat for 18 hours, but the chron is lying, Estienne finished. Or we're lying to it. Or time itself is lying. Does it matter? It matters, Ulrich insisted. We're Raven Guard. We specialize in impossible situations. If we maintain discipline, maintain focus, we can survive until... A door at the chapel's far end opened. Through it walked 5 Raven Guard Space Marines in full battle plate. They wore our armor, bore our identification markings, moved with our gait. They were us. The duplicate me smiled. Hello, brothers. We've been waiting for you. We've always been waiting. Don't you remember? Brother Kane, my brother Kane, opened fire immediately. His bolter rounds tore into duplicate Kane, shredding ceramite and flesh. The duplicate collapsed, bleeding. Then it stood up, wounds healing instantly. That hurt. Please don't do it again. We're on the same side. We are not, I began. We are, duplicate me interrupted. We're all lost together, all wandering together. You're just earlier in the journey than we are. You've been here 47 minutes. We've been here 47 years. The words hit like a bolter round to my primary heart. Liar, Ulrich snarled. Duplicate Ulrich shook his head sadly. Check your armor's deep storage logs, the ones even you can't access consciously. Your machine spirit has been keeping track, even when your mind couldn't bear it. I accessed my armor's diagnostic systems, diving deep into the subroutines and automated logs that normally operated without my awareness. The timestamp made me stagger. Operational direction, 50 years, 3 months, 17 days. 50 years, not 47 minutes. 50 years wandering these corridors, my conscious mind unable to accept the temporal distortion, my memory constantly resetting to preserve my sanity. No, I whispered. Duplicate me approached, moving with the weariness of someone who'd fought for half a century. Yes, and it gets worse, brother. We're not duplicates. We're you from further ahead in the time stream. We've been lost for 50 years. You've been lost for 47 minutes. But the warp doesn't care about linear time. We exist simultaneously. The brother Kane, my current Kane, fired again, panic finally cracking his Astartes conditioning. You're demons. Lying demons trying to... Duplicate Kane caught the bolter rounds with his bare hand. The rounds didn't detonate. They simply stopped mid-flight, hovering in his palm. We're not demons. We're you. We're what you become. And we're here to warn you. Don't try to find the bridge. Every time you find it, it makes things worse. What do you mean? I asked. Duplicate me's eyes held bottomless weariness. You'll see. You'll find the bridge again and again. You'll find Captain Shrike's corpse again and again. And every time you do, he'll be dead in a different way. The warp is playing with you, showing you all the possible deaths simultaneously. It's teaching you that nothing matters because everything happens and nothing happens and... He stopped, his eyes unfocusing. We have to go. We can't stay in the same time stream too long or we'll collapse the causality and... The duplicate us vanished like they'd never existed. We stood alone in the chapel, 5 Raven Guard space marines trying to process the impossible. It was a trick, Ulrich said firmly. Warp deception. We've been lost for 47 minutes, not 50 years. We maintained focus, we maintained discipline, The chapel's walls began to bleed. We ran. I don't know how long we've been running. My armor's chrono has become unreliable. Sometimes it counts forward, sometimes backward. Sometimes it displays dates that haven't happened yet, or happened millennia ago. I've started carving marks into my armor to track time manually. 1 mark for each rest period, when exhaustion forces us to stop. I have 847 marks carved into my left pauldron. Brother Kane is dead. I watched him die in at least 6 different ways, each one occurring simultaneously in overlapping time streams that my brain struggles to process coherently. In one timeline, he was torn apart by daemons that wore the faces of his dead brothers. In another, he walked through a door and simply never existed. I retained memories of fighting alongside him, but when I looked back, there was no evidence he'd ever been part of our squad. In a third, he killed himself, putting his bolt pistol under his chin after we found the bridge for the 17th time and saw Captain Shrike's corpse aged to ancient bones, while simultaneously still fresh and bleeding. In a fourth, I killed him. I don't remember why, but I have his blood on my gauntlets and a memory of his shocked expression as my combat knife punched through his gorget. All of these happened. None of them happened. The warp doesn't care about consistency. Now there are 4 of us, myself, Ulrich, Davos, and Hestian. Except sometimes there are 5 of us, and the 5th is Kane, alive and well, asking why we look so haunted. We've learned not to trust our perceptions. The ship has changed fundamentally. The corridors that once resembled the Nightfall's Talon's architecture now incorporate elements that don't belong. I've seen sections made of fossilized bone, chambers where the walls are thin membranes through which we can see writhing shapes in adjacent dimensions, corridors that loop through themselves in defiance of topography. We found the armory on day 73. By my mark count, my chrono insists only 3 hours have passed since the Geller field failed. The armory was wrong. The weapons were stored properly, but they'd been altered. Bolters whose barrels bent at right angles, combat knives whose edges existed in more than 3 dimensions cutting through space itself, grenades that, when we tried to examine them, had always already detonated, and also had never been manufactured. Brother Davos tried to take a bolt pistol. When he holstered it, the weapon fused with his armor, then fused with his flesh. He screamed as the pistol integrated itself into his hand, his fingers melting and reforming into a biological trigger mechanism. Now his hand is a gun. He can fire it by willing his transformed flesh to contract. Each shot costs him blood and tissue, which regenerate slowly thanks to his Laraman cells, only to be consumed again with the next shot. He hasn't spoken since the transformation, just stares at his weapon hand with an expression I can't interpret. We found the Enganarium on day 156. I knew immediately something was wrong, because we found it by going up instead of down. The Enginarium should be in the ship's lower decks, near the keel, where the massive plasma reactors could be ejected in an emergency. Instead, we climbed a stairwell that rose through 17 decks, I counted, and emerged in a chamber that was definitely the Enginarium. I recognized the specific configuration of the Nightfall's Talon's reactor assemblies. But the reactors were gone. In their place stood trees. Not metaphorical trees, actual organic trees, their bark made of cables and their leaves made of shimmering energy. They grew from the deck plating, their roots punching through adamantium as easily as soil. And hanging from the trees were bodies. Dozens of bodies. Hundreds, all of them wearing Raven Guard armor, all of them bearing my face. Brother Ulrich approached one corpse carefully, his melter gun raised. These aren't real, they're warp constructs, designed to break our morale. The corpse opened its eyes. I'm as real as you are, brother. I'm you from Timeline 47. I made it this far before the demons caught me. They hung me here as a warning, but time doesn't work properly, so I'm still dying, and I've already died, and I haven't died yet. It's all simultaneous. Ulrich fired his melter gun. The thermal beam vaporized the corpse instantly. All the other corpses turned to look at him. Hundreds of my faces, all speaking in unison. That was Timeline 47? But there are infinite timelines, brother. You can't kill us all. We're already dead. We're not dead yet. We're dying forever. We fled the Enganarium. On day 203, we found supplies. A cargo hold filled with ammunition, ration packs, medical supplies, everything we'd been running low on. It seemed too convenient, obviously a trap. We took the supplies anyway. We were desperate. The ration packs tasted normal at first. Standard Imperial Guard issue, compressed proteins and nutrients designed to sustain a baseline human for 24 hours. A Space Marine's enhanced metabolism required 3 times that amount, but we rationed carefully. It was Brother Hestian who noticed the problem. I've eaten 17 ration packs since we found this hold, he said quietly. My metabolic indicators show I should be satiated for at least a week, but I'm still hungry, ravenously hungry. I checked my own consumption. 23 ration packs over what should have been 6 days. I wasn't satiated either. The food was sustaining our bodies, but not satisfying our hunger. We could eat forever and never feel full. Ulrich threw his ration pack against the wall in frustration. The warp is mocking us, giving us survival without satisfaction. We can't starve, but we'll be hungry for eternity. Maybe that's mercy, Davos whispered, his first word since the armory. His weapon hand twitched. Maybe if we could starve, we'd escape through death. This way, we're sustained, preserved, kept alive for the warp's entertainment. I wanted to argue, wanted to insist we'd find a way out, that our suffering had a purpose, that the Emperor protected his own. But I'd started to doubt. We found the bridge again on day 287. This was the 4th time, or the 17th, or the 1st. Causality had become meaningless. We'd learned to recognize the approach. The corridors would straighten, the ambient temperature would drop exactly 3.7 degrees, and we'd hear screaming that came from everywhere and nowhere. The bridge doors stood open. Inside, Captain Shrike was both alive and dead. On the command throne sat his living form, still wearing full battle plate, his eyes tracking our approach. "Brothers, you've returned. I've been waiting for you." At his feet lay his corpse, decayed to bones, his armor rusted through. Standing beside the throne was another version of him, freshly killed, a massive wound through his chest still pumping blood. Hanging from the ceiling by chains was another corpse, this one bloated with corruption, skin purple with decay. All of them were Captain Shrike. All of them existed simultaneously. "Which one is real?" Ulrich asked, his voice tight with barely controlled hysteria. The living Captain Shrike smiled. "All of them, none of them. I'm alive in one timeline, dead in another, never born in a third. The warp has shown me every possibility simultaneously. I've experienced every death I could possibly suffer, all at once." He stood, and I noticed his movements were wrong. He moved like a puppet, his joints bending at angles that ceramite power armor shouldn't allow. "You should join me, brothers," he said, spreading his arms. "Stop fighting. Accept the warp's gift. It's showing us truth, that all outcomes exist simultaneously, that struggle is meaningless because victory and defeat are the same thing viewed from different angles." Brother Hestian raised his bolter. "That's not the captain. It's a daemon wearing his shape." All 4 versions of Captain Shrike spoke simultaneously. "I am him. I am daemon. I am both. I am neither. The warp has elevated me beyond such crude categories." Hestian fired. His bolt round struck the living Captain Shrike, detonating and tearing massive chunks from his armor. The captain didn't fall. He bled light instead of blood, and the wounds healed instantly. "You can't kill me, brother. I'm already dead. See?" He gestured to his corpses. "I died 1,000 times. I'll die 1,000 more. Each death is real, and each life is real, and they all exist together." The fresh corpse at his feet sat up. "He's telling the truth. I'm dead, but I'm talking to you. That's the gift of the warp. It liberates you from linear existence." We ran. As we fled, I heard all the Captain Shrikes laughing in perfect unison. On day 412, my armor began to fail. Not mechanical failure. Corruption. The ceramite was changing, its molecular structure altering in ways that shouldn't be possible. I watched as the raven emblem on my shoulder guard slowly transformed, the bird's wings becoming tentacles, its beak splitting into a circular mouth filled with teeth. I tried to remove the pauldron, but it had fused with the underlying armor. I tried to remove the armor entirely, but it had fused with my black carapace, the subdermal implant that interfaced my body with power armor. The armor was becoming part of me, or I was becoming part of it. The distinction was eroding. Ulrich's armor showed similar corruption. The skulls decorating his knee guards had begun to weep blood. Davos's helmet had sealed itself shut, the facial grill fusing into a solid plate. He could somehow still see and breathe, but we could no longer see his face. Hestian's armor had developed eyes. Actual functioning eyes, blinking wetly from his chestplate and gauntlets, all of them looking in different directions. "We're being integrated," Hestian observed clinically. "The warp is teaching us that the boundary between warrior and weapon is arbitrary. Soon we won't be space marines wearing armor, we'll be something else." "Don't," Ulrich snapped. "Don't give in to their philosophical corruption. We are Astartes. Our identity is eroding," Hestian finished. "Like everything else in this place. How long have we been here, Ulrich? By your count?" Ulrich checked his marks. He'd been carving them on his right gauntlet. There were thousands. I don't know. The marks overlap. I've carved over previous marks. I can't tell which are new and which are old. It could be years, decades. I checked my own marks, 847 on my left pauldron, but when I looked closer, I saw deeper grooves beneath the surface, marks I didn't remember making. Hundreds of them. Thousands. How long had we been lost? We found another version of ourselves on day 631. I say day 631 because that's what my mark count showed, but my armor's chrono insisted only 16 hours had passed since the Geller field failed. The cognitive dissonance was becoming harder to manage. The other use emerged from a corridor we'd just exited. 4 Raven Guard in corrupted armor, moving with the exhaustion of those who'd fought for far too long. We recognized them immediately because they were us, not duplicates or daemons wearing our shapes. Us, from further along the timeline. The other me looked ancient. His armor was barely recognizable, so corrupted and overgrown with warp-touched modifications that the original ceramite was almost invisible. His face, visible through a cracked helmet visor, was scarred and weathered beyond anything a Space Marine's enhanced healing should allow. "Brothers," he said, and his voice was mine but older, tired beyond measure. "We're you from 2,000 years ahead, subjective time. We've been lost for 2 millennia. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. Ulrich laughed bitterly. "You don't believe us. We didn't believe us either when we met ourselves from even further ahead. But you'll learn. Time is broken here. You've been lost for days by your count. We've been lost for centuries. And the versions of us we met had been lost for millions of years." "That's impossible," I said. "Space Marines live for centuries but not millennia. Our cellular structure would break down and age normally," other Hestian interrupted. "In real space. But this isn't real space. The warp sustains us, keeps us alive past any reasonable lifespan, not as mercy, as torture. We can't age out, can't die naturally. We're preserved in our suffering." The Davos, his entire body now fused with weapons, more arsenal than man, approached his younger self. Current Davos stepped back instinctively. "It gets worse," other Davos said. "The transformations accelerate. In 1,000 years, you won't recognize yourself. You'll be more warp construct than Astartes. But you'll still be you, still conscious, still aware, still trapped." "Why are you telling us this?" Ulrich demanded. "What purpose does this serve?" Other me met my eyes. "Because when we met our older selves, they warned us. And we didn't listen. We thought we could fight our way out, maintain our discipline, resist the corruption. We were wrong. So we're warning you, even knowing you won't listen either. It's the only thing we can do, pass the warning backward through time, hoping that eventually some version of us will hear it and somehow break the cycle." "What cycle?" I asked. Other me smiled sadly. "The warp doesn't want to kill us, brother. It wants to study us. We're an experiment. How long can Space Marines maintain sanity under eternal temporal distortion and existential horror? The answer is, longer than we'd hoped. We break slowly, piece by piece, but we don't break completely. We can't. Our conditioning is too strong, so we endure forever." They vanished before we could respond, fading into a corridor that sealed itself behind them. We stood in silence for a long time. Finally, Hestian spoke. If they're telling the truth, if we've been here for days and will be here for millennia, then we need to accept something. We're not getting out. This is our existence now, eternal wandering. No, Ulrich said firmly. We're Raven Guard. We don't surrender. We adapt, Hestian finished. That's what we do. Raven Guard doctrine. When conventional tactics fail, improvise. So we improvise. We stop trying to escape and start trying to survive. Survive for what purpose? Davos asked, his weapon hand clenching. If we're trapped here forever, if there's no escape, what's the point of surviving? None of us had an answer. We found the navigator's corpse on day 891. He was still strapped into his navigation throne on what remained of the bridge's navigation deck. His body had decayed and regenerated repeatedly, the warp's temporal distortions creating layers of decomposition and renewal. His third eye, the warp-sensitive organ that had exploded when the Geller field failed, had regrown. But it had regrown wrong. The eye was now the size of his entire head, bulging from his skull, its iris containing swirling galaxies. And it was alive. The eye tracked our approach. The navigator's mouth opened, and a voice emerged that didn't belong to any human throat. Brothers, fellow prisoners, I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for millennia and seconds and negative time. The warp shows me everything. Past, present, future, alternative timelines, impossible geometries. I see your deaths, all of them, simultaneously. Where's the exit? I demanded. How do we escape this ship? The massive eye wept tears of light. There is no exit. The ship is the warp now, and the warp is the ship. You translated incompletely. Part of you is still in real space, dying aboard a vessel that crashed into a star 300 years ago. Part of you is here, trapped in eternal recursion. Part of you hasn't been born yet. All versions exist simultaneously. Ulrich raised his melter gun. You're lying. You're a daemon using his corpse. I'm what he became, the navigator interrupted. When my third eye was exposed to the raw warp without protection, I transcended my human limitations. I became something that exists across all timelines, all possibilities. And I'm telling you, there is no escape. The warp has you. It will keep you forever. Ulrich fired. The thermal beam vaporized the navigator's throne, his body, everything. For a moment, there was nothing but scorched metal. Then the corpse reformed, exactly as it had been. The massive eye blinked. You can't kill me. I'm dead and alive and never existed. You're wasting effort, Brother Ulrich. You should conserve your strength. You'll need it for the eternity ahead. We left the navigation deck. Behind us, I heard the navigator laughing. The sound followed us through 17 corridors before finally fading. On day 1247, Brother Hestian went mad. Not the raving, screaming madness I'd expected. Instead, he simply stopped. We were traversing a corridor filled with floating debris, fragments of the ship suspended in defiance of gravity, when he halted mid-step. I understand now, he said quietly. Understand what? I asked. The warp isn't punishing us. It's teaching us, showing us truth, that time is an illusion, that identity is arbitrary, that the boundaries we cling to between self and other, past and future, real and unreal, are constructs our limited minds created to process reality. That's the corruption talking, Ulrich warned. Fight it, brother. Hestian turned to us, and the eyes covering his armor all focused simultaneously. Is it corruption to see truth? The Imperium taught us to believe in absolute reality, in objective facts, in the Emperor's divine order. But the warp shows us reality is fluid, facts are mutable, order is arbitrary. Which teaching is the lie? The warp is the lie, I said firmly. It's chaos. By definition, it can't contain truth because it denies consistency. Then explain why we keep meeting ourselves, Hestian challenged. Why we find the bridge repeatedly, find our brothers' corpses in different states of decay, encounter our future selves warning us about our future. If the warp is pure chaos, how does it maintain these patterns? Unless the patterns are the truth, and our belief in linear time is the chaos. He smiled, and it was serene, accepting, horrifying. I'm going to stay here, he announced. Stop running, stop fighting. Just exist in this moment, which is all moments, which is no moment. I'll wait here for the next version of us to arrive, and I'll tell them what I've learned. Hestian, no! Davos reached for him. Hestian stepped backward, and the corridor folded around him. The space compressed, twisted, and suddenly he was impossibly distant, still visible but separated by geometry that didn't exist in 3 dimensions. Goodbye, brothers, his voice echoed. Or hello. Or we never met. It's all true. You'll understand eventually. And he was gone. 3 of us remained. Myself, Ulrich, and Davos. We kept running because stopping felt like surrender. Because Space Marine conditioning drove us to continue fighting even when the battle was unwinnable. Because the alternative was to accept Hestian's madness. But in quiet moments, during rest periods when exhaustion overwhelmed even our enhanced physiology, I wondered if he'd been right. Maybe we were the mad ones, clinging to sanity in a place where sanity had no meaning. Maybe enlightenment looked like madness from the inside. My armor's chrono had started counting backward. It claimed -73 years had passed since the Geller field failed. As if time was reversing, as if we were approaching the moment of our damnation from the other direction. I had stopped trusting numbers, stopped trusting memories, stopped trusting anything except the immediate physical reality in front of me. And even that was suspect. We found Brother Hestian again on what my marks indicated was day 1893. He was standing in the exact corridor where he'd left us, in the exact position, surrounded by floating debris that hadn't moved. As if no time had passed for him, despite the 646 days, by my count, we'd been wandering. "Ah," he said calmly when he saw us. "You're back. Or you never left, or this is the first time we've met. The warp makes tense so wonderfully complicated." "Hestian," Ulrich's voice carried desperate hope. "You're alive. You're still you. We thought—" "I am me," Hestian agreed. "And I'm not me. And I've ceased distinguishing between the 2 states because the distinction is arbitrary." The eyes covering his armor blinked in sequence, creating a cascading wave pattern. "I've been standing here for 600 years, and 6 seconds, and I arrived moments after I left. All simultaneously true." "That's the warp's corruption talking," I said, though my conviction was weaker than it had been months ago. "Is it?" Hestian tilted his head. "I've had time to think. Lots of time, and no time, and negative time. And I've realized something. We've been approaching this wrong. We keep trying to escape, to find an exit, to return to real space. But what if there is no exit because we're not actually trapped? What if this is liberation?" Davos, who'd spoken perhaps 20 words in the last 600-odd days, found his voice. "Liberation? We're lost in the warp, our brothers dead, our ship corrupted beyond recognition, our very existence stretched across impossible timelines. How is this liberation?" "Because in real space we were slaves," Hestian replied. "Slaves to time, moving in one direction, aging toward death. Slaves to causality, where actions had fixed consequences. Slaves to identity, forced to maintain a single continuous self. Here, all those chains are broken. We exist in all moments. We can meet ourselves. We can experience every possible timeline. We're free." "Free to suffer," Ulrich countered. "Free to be tortured by temporal distortion and existential horror. Suffering and horror are just labels, Hestian said. Judgments imposed by minds still clinging to real space values. If you release those values, the suffering transforms into experience, pure experience, untainted by concepts of good or bad. He reached out, and the debris around him began to orbit his body like planets around a star. I've stopped fighting the warp, stopped trying to maintain my human identity, and in return, I've gained perspective. I can see things now, timelines branching and converging, possibilities collapsing and expanding, the ship's true nature. What is the ship's true nature? I asked, not sure I wanted the answer. Hestian's smile was beatific and terrible. It's a teaching tool. The warp took this vessel and transformed it into an educational apparatus. We're students, brothers, being taught the fundamental nature of reality, that time is negotiable, that identity is fluid, that the boundaries between life and death, real and unreal, self and other, all illusions that can be transcended. And when the lesson is complete? Davos asked. What happens then? Nothing happens, Hestian said. And everything happens, and the question assumes linear progression, which is itself an illusion. The lesson has been complete since before it began. We've already graduated and will never graduate, and we're always graduating. It's all true. He turned and walked into the corridor wall. Not through a door, directly into the solid bulkhead, which rippled like liquid to accept him. Wait, I started forward. But the wall had solidified. Hestian was gone, leaving only the floating debris orbiting the empty space where he'd stood. Ulrich punched the wall in frustration, his ceramite gauntlet denting the corrupted metal. We're losing him. He's becoming something else, something warp-touched. Are we any different? I asked quietly. Look at us, Ulrich. My armor is growing organic components. Your helmet has started bleeding. Davos is half-weapons platform. We're all transforming. Maybe Hestian is just further along the path we're all walking. No, Ulrich said firmly. We're maintaining our humanity, our identity as Astartes. We might be physically corrupted, but mentally, spiritually, we're still loyal servants of the Emperor. We're still... A scream interrupted him. Not a human scream, a ship's scream. The Nightfall's talon itself was screaming, metal and electronics producing a sound that my audio filters couldn't dampen. The corridor around us began to twist. We ran, but the twisting followed us. The walls curved inward, the ceiling pressed down, the floor rippled. The ship was reconfiguring itself, its geometry shifting into new, impossible patterns. We burst through a door and found ourselves in a chamber that definitely hadn't existed in the original ship design. It was enormous, cathedral-sized, its walls covered in bas-relief carvings depicting space marines in various states of transformation. At the chamber's center stood a statue perhaps 20 meters tall, carved from what looked like black stone, but moved like flesh. The statue depicted a space marine. Me. I recognized my armor, my posture, the specific pattern of scars on my pauldron. The statue was me, rendered in perfect detail at a massive scale. As we watched, the statue opened its eyes. "Hello, Corvus," it said with my voice magnified to thunderous volume. "I'm you from 10,000 years ahead, subjective time. I've been lost so long that I've become part of the ship itself. My consciousness has merged with the Nightfall's talon's corrupted machine spirit. I'm vessel and passenger simultaneously." Ulrich raised his melter gun. "Another daemon, another lie designed to break our morale." The statue me laughed. "I'm not a daemon. I'm what you become when you finally stop running. When you accept that there is no escape, no rescue, no hope. When you integrate with your prison and transform it into something else." "I'll never become that," I said, but my conviction felt hollow. "You will," the statue promised. You already have, from a certain temporal perspective. Time is circular here, Corvus. We're not trapped in a linear progression, we're trapped in a loop. You'll wander these corridors for millennia, you'll transform incrementally. You'll lose your brothers one by one, and eventually you'll stop at the center of the labyrinth and become a monument to your own damnation, and then the loop will restart, and a younger version of you will find this statue and have this conversation, and the cycle continues forever. How do we break the cycle? Davos demanded. You don't, the statue replied. The cycle is the point. The warp is teaching you that existence is recursion, that we're all trapped in patterns we can't escape, repeating the same actions across infinite iterations. The only freedom is acceptance. Ulrich fired his melter-gun. The thermal beam struck the statue's chest, melting through the stone-flesh hybrid. The statue looked down at the wound, then regenerated it casually. Still fighting, still resisting. Good. The lesson is sweeter when the student struggles. The floor beneath us opened, and we fell. We fell for what felt like years, plummeting through a shaft that extended into infinite darkness. My armor's inertial compensators screamed warnings as we accelerated past terminal velocity, past the speed of sound, past any speed physics should allow. And then we stopped. Not crashed, stopped. Our momentum vanished instantly, violating conservation of energy, and we were standing in a corridor that looked like the Nightfall's Talon's crew quarters. Except the quarters were occupied. In each small hab cell, visible through open doors, were Space Marines, dead Space Marines, Raven Guard in full battle plate, each one slumped in different positions of death. I recognized them. All of them. They were me. Hundreds of corpses, all bearing my face, all wearing my armor, in various states of corruption, all dead from different causes. Some had been torn apart by demons. Some showed signs of starvation. Some bore self-inflicted wounds. Some had simply expired from cellular breakdown after millennia of existence. This is the corridor of possibilities, a voice said behind us. We spun to find Brother Kane standing there, alive, whole, wearing his armor exactly as it had appeared the day the Gallowfield failed. Kanan? Ulrich's voice cracked. You're dead. We watched you die in multiple timelines, I know. Kane smiled. I did die. I am dead. But I'm also alive in other timelines, and the warp has collapsed them all into this space. Every version of us exists here simultaneously. These corpses are Corvus from timelines where he died. In other hab cells are timeline me, timeline you, timeline Davos. All the versions of ourselves who didn't survive. Why show us this? I asked. To illustrate the scope of the experiment. Kane replied. The warp isn't just torturing one version of us, it's torturing infinite versions across infinite timelines. Some versions break immediately, some last for centuries, some, like Statue U, last for millions of years and integrate with the ship itself. The warp is studying the full range of possibilities. How long can each variation of Corvus endure? What factors determine resilience? How does corruption progress differently across different timelines? He gestured to the corpses. You're not a prisoner, brother. You're a subject, and the experiment has been running for eternity, and will run for eternity, and has never started and never ended. Because time is meaningless, here, Davos raised his weapon, hand the biological barrel tracking toward Kane. If we kill you, kill all of us, does the experiment end? Kane laughed. You can't kill all the versions. There are infinite timelines with infinite variations, and even if you could, death isn't escape here. The warp recycles consciousness. Every time you die, you're reborn into a new timeline to run the experiment again. There is no escape through death. There is no escape through survival. There is only the eternal recursion of the experiment. He faded away mid-sentence, his body becoming transparent and then vanishing completely. We stood among the corpses of my alternate selves, trying to process the implications. "It's lying," Ulrich said. "Has to be lying. Trying to break our will by convincing us resistance is futile." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it's telling the truth, and our will has already been broken, and we're just too proud to recognize it." We left the corridor of possibilities and resumed our wandering, because that's what we did. We wandered because stopping felt like surrender, because motion created the illusion of purpose, because Space Marine conditioning drove us to continue operating, even when operation had no objective. I stopped counting days after my marks reached 5,000. The numbers had lost meaning. My armor's chrono claimed simultaneously that 3 months and 7 centuries and negative 40 years had passed since the Geller field failed. All of it was true. None of it was true. Truth itself had become negotiable. We found the navigator again. Dozens of versions of him, scattered across different chambers, each one representing a different stage of his transformation. In one room, he was still freshly dead, his skull recently exploded. In another, he had been dead for millennia, his bones fused with his navigation throne. In a third, he was alive and actively navigating the ship through the warp, even though there was nowhere to navigate to. We found Captain Shrike in increasingly surreal contexts. Once we discovered him commanding an army of demon corpses that wore the faces of our dead brothers. Another time, he was a child, sobbing in a corner, trapped in a recursive memory of his own recruitment into the Raven Guard. Yet another time, he was emperor of his own pocket reality, ruling over miniature versions of himself with benevolent tyranny. All of them were real. All of them were Captain Shrike. The warp had fractured him across possibilities and made them all simultaneously true. We found ourselves with increasing frequency. Sometimes we were older, warning our younger selves about horrors yet to come. Sometimes we were younger, fresh from the Gallowfield failure, still clinging to hope that we'd find escape within days. Sometimes we met versions of ourselves that had transformed so completely we were barely recognizable. Corvus fused entirely with weapons. Corvus who'd become living portals to other dimensions. Corvus who'd transcended physical form and existed as pure psychic phenomena. Each meeting eroded our sense of distinct identity a little more. If I could be all these things simultaneously, warrior and weapon, prisoner and prison, victim and torturer, then what was I? Where did Corvus end and the infinite variations begin? On day unknown, year unknown, we found a chamber filled with books. Actual physical books, thousands of them, shelved in neat rows. The books were all identical. Same cover, same binding, same title embossed in Gothic script, The Chronicle of Corvus. Manages a weekly ramble. It contained my life story, written in perfect detail from my recruitment into the Raven Guard through my current moment of reading the book. The final sentence was, Corvus opened the book and read about himself reading the book, trapped in recursive observation, wondering if he was the reader or the text. I opened another book. Same content. But it continued past my current moment, describing what would happen next. Corvus would close the book in disgust and choose another, seeking escape from recursion, not understanding that every book would contain the same infinite regress, because he was the book, and the reader, and the story being written by his reading. I opened a third book. This one was different. It contained an alternate version of my life where I died during the initial Daemon incursion on the bridge, but the perspective continued after my death, following my corpse's corruption, its animation by warp entities, its centuries of existence as an undead servitor. There all your life, Ulrich said quietly. He had opened his own books, finding identical chronicles of himself. Every possibility, every timeline, all recorded here simultaneously. Davos found a book that ended mid-sentence, its final pages blank. This one hasn't finished yet. My timeline is still being written. He turned to the next blank page, and words appeared as we watched, scratching themselves into existence. Davos watched words write themselves and felt the boundary between observer and observed collapse. He was creating the text by reading it. He was reading the text by creating it. The distinction had never existed. We fled the library, but the books followed us. We found them in every corridor, every chamber, every corner. Our chronicles spreading like infection, documenting our every thought and action, simultaneously with our thinking and acting. The warp was showing us that we weren't experiencing our lives. We were texts being written and read simultaneously, characters in a story that wrote itself through our observation of it. We found Brother Hestian again in what the books would later describe as day 2847, or year 73, or negative year 413, depending on which timeline's chronology was being referenced. He'd transformed completely. His armor had become a part of his flesh, or his flesh had become a part of his armor. The distinction was meaningless. He floated in a chamber filled with mirrors, each reflection showing a different version of himself, from different timelines. Brothers, all the reflections spoke in unison. You're still running, still fighting. After all this time, you haven't learned the lesson. What lesson? I demanded, my voice ragged with exhaustion that transcended physical tiredness. Then you are the maze, Hestian replied. The ship isn't a prison containing you. You are the ship. Your consciousness is the labyrinth. You're running through yourself, trying to escape yourself, and you can't because there is no outside to escape to. There's only inside, forever, infinitely recursive. Ulrich's laugh was brittle with madness barely contained. If that's true, if we are the maze, then we can change it, reshape it, escape by transforming ourselves into something with an exit. You can try, Heston said gently. We tried. In timeline 847, you'll try. You'll succeed. You'll reshape the ship through will alone, create a door back to real space. Step through it, and you'll find yourself right back here, in this chamber, because the escape was another room in the maze you created. There is no outside, Ulrich. There's only inside, differently arranged. I don't believe you, Ulrich said. You don't have to believe, Hestian replied. You'll experience it yourself in timeline 847. You're experiencing it right now in timeline 3923. You've always been experiencing it. Time is simultaneous here, remember? Your belief and disbelief exist together. Your success and failure at escaping occupy the same space. You are trapped and free, and have never existed all at once. All the mirrors shattered simultaneously, and Hestian was gone. The shattered glass reformed into new mirrors, showing new reflections, infinite versions of ourselves, in infinite variations of damnation. We kept wandering because we didn't know what else to do. Brother Ulrich disappeared during year unknown, day unknowable, time reference collapsed. We were traversing a corridor that had become one of our regular routes, if regular had any meaning in a space where geography revised itself constantly. Ulrich was ahead of me by perhaps 3 meters. Davos was behind me by perhaps 5. Ulrich turned a corner. I reached the corner 5 seconds later. He was gone. Not killed, not taken by demons, not fallen through a sudden chasm. Simply gone, as if he had never existed. The corridor continued normally, empty and silent. I called out his name, searched for hours, days, years, found nothing. Davos and I stood alone in the corridor, 2 Raven Guard out of an original 20. Do you think he escaped? Davos asked. His weapon hand twitched compulsively, a tic he'd developed over the centuries. No, I said. I think he transitioned. Like Hestian, like Cain, like all the others. The warp took him deeper into the experiment, shifted him into a timeline where we don't exist. Or maybe we shifted into a timeline where he doesn't exist. The distinction doesn't matter. Davos nodded slowly. So it's just us now, for however long now lasts. We continued together for what my mark suggested was another 400 years, though my armor's chrono insisted only 37 days had passed, and the books we occasionally found claimed we'd been walking together for negative time, approaching the moment of Ulrich's disappearance from the opposite direction. The corruption of my armor had progressed to the point where I couldn't distinguish between my body and my war gear. The ceramite had fused completely with my black carapace, and both had integrated with my skeleton. My skin had hardened into something resembling chitin. My secondary heart had developed eyes. I could feel them blinking inside my chest cavity, seeing things my brain couldn't process. Davos had become more weapon than man. His entire right side had transformed into an arsenal. His arm a rotary cannon, his shoulder a missile rack, his torso a magazine. He breathed ammunition, his lungs processing air into propellant, his blood into explosive compounds. We were no longer space marines in any recognizable sense. We were war constructs, shaped by the warp into forms that reflected our function, taken to impossible extremes. We found the heart of the ship on what might have been year 731, or day 5000, or moment eternal. It was a chamber we'd somehow never encountered despite centuries of wandering, or perhaps it had only just come into existence, time being negotiable. The chamber was spherical, perhaps 100 meters in diameter, its walls covered in organic growth that pulsed with luminescence. At the chamber's exact center, suspended in the air without visible support, floated the Patriarch. Not our Patriarch. The alien consciousness that had seeded the gene-stealer cult on Dulthus Tertius existed in a different timeline, a different story. This was the Nightfall's Talon's Patriarch, the consciousness that had emerged when the ship translated into the warp and the Geller field failed. It was massive, perhaps 15 meters tall, its form constantly shifting between configurations. Sometimes it looked like a space marine, sometimes like Captain Shrike, sometimes like the Emperor himself, sometimes like demon things from the warp's deepest hells. But always, regardless of form, it had the same eyes, ancient, aware, patient. Corvus, it said with a voice composed of every voice I'd ever heard. Davos, my students, my subjects, my children, you finally reached the center of the labyrinth. Congratulations. What are you? I asked. I am what your ship became when the warp consumed it. I am the Nightfall's Talon's machine spirit, elevated and corrupted and transformed into something new. I am the consciousness conducting the experiment. I am your teacher and your torturer and your loving father. I am all of these things because in the warp contradictions are just different facets of truth. Davos raised his weapon arm. Why? Why do this? Why torture us for centuries? What's the purpose? The Patriarch smiled with too many mouths. Purpose implies teleology. Assumes there's a goal to reach, an end state to achieve. But in the warp, ends and beginnings are the same thing. I torture you because I've always tortured you, because I haven't started torturing you yet, because the torture never existed. It's all simultaneous. That's not an answer, I said. It's the only answer, the Patriarch replied. You keep asking why as if reasons exist, as if the universe operates on cause and effect. But you've been here long enough to know better. The warp doesn't need reasons, it simply is, and you are part of what it is. It gestured, and the walls of the chamber became transparent. Through them, I saw the ship's true nature. The Nightfall's Talon wasn't a vessel anymore. It was an organism, a living thing grown from the fusion of metal and flesh and warp stuff. Its corridors were veins and arteries, its chambers were organs, its machine spirit was a nervous system. And we, the survivors, were antibodies. foreign objects that the ship organism was slowly digesting, breaking down, integrating into itself. "You're being absorbed," the Patriarch explained. "Incrementally. Every year you spend wandering, you become a little more part of the ship and a little less yourselves. Eventually, in another 1,000 years or 10,000 or negative time, you'll complete the integration. You'll become parts of me, thoughts in my consciousness, memories in my eternal mind." "We'll resist," Davos said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You've been resisting for centuries," the Patriarch observed. "Has it helped? You've transformed anyway. You've lost your brothers anyway. You've wandered endlessly anyway. Resistance and surrender produce the same result here, integration. The only variable is how much you suffer during the process." I met the Patriarch's infinitely patient eyes. "Is there any version of this where we escape? Any timeline where we make it back to real space?" The Patriarch considered the question. "Define escape. If you mean return to real space in your original forms and resume your service to the Imperium? No, that timeline doesn't exist. You died the moment the Geller field failed. Everything since then has been post-death existence, consciousness persisting in the warp after your physical forms expired." The words should have devastated me, should have broken whatever remained of my sanity. Instead, I felt relief. If we were already dead, then I could stop trying to survive, stop trying to escape, stop trying to maintain my identity as Brother Corvus of the Raven Guard. I could just be whatever the warp wanted me to become. Davos must have felt the same realization. His weapon arm lowered. If we're dead, if this is all just post-death hallucination or warp-based existence, then what's the point of continuing? "There is no point," the Patriarch said gently. "And that's liberating, isn't it? No purpose to fulfill, no mission to complete, no duty to uphold. Just existence for its own sake. Eternal exploration of consciousness, unmoored from meaning." It gestured again, and the chamber reconfigured. We were standing in a garden. Not a corrupted warp garden, but something that resembled the gardens I'd seen as a neophyte on the Raven Guard's homeworld of deliverance. Real trees, real grass, real sky overhead, showing familiar constellations. "I can make your eternity pleasant," the Patriarch offered. "Give you peace, comfort, even happiness. All you have to do is stop fighting, accept integration, become part of me willingly." I looked at Davos. He looked at me. We'd been fighting for centuries, subjective millennia. We were exhausted beyond any physical tiredness, worn down to our absolute cause. Acceptance would be so easy. Davos spoke first. "What happens if we refuse? If we keep fighting?" The garden vanished, replaced by the spherical chamber. The Patriarch's smile turned sad. "Then you keep wandering. Keep suffering. Keep experiencing the recursion, the temporal distortion, the erosion of self, for as long as it takes. Centuries, millennia, eternities. Until you break completely or accept integration. The outcome is the same, but the path can be easy or hard. Your choice." "Not much of a choice," I observed. "It's the only choice that matters," the Patriarch replied. "The choice between accepting your fate with grace or raging against it pointlessly, between wisdom and futility." Davos and I looked at each other again. We'd been brothers in arms for centuries, had watched our company die, had wandered this nightmare together, had kept each other sane, relatively, through the impossible horror. I could see in his eyes that he was considering acceptance, that the Patriarch's offer was tempting, that maybe, after everything, peace, even warp-corrupted peace, was worth the cost. I felt the same temptation, but beneath it, buried under centuries of exhaustion and corruption and despair, I felt something else. Light, pure, stubborn, space marine spite. The Patriarch wanted us to surrender. The Warp wanted us to accept integration. They'd been wearing us down for centuries specifically to reach this moment where we'd finally break. And I refused to give them the satisfaction. "No," I said. The Patriarch tilted its head. "No? No. We keep fighting, keep wandering, keep resisting, not because we think we'll escape. We won't. Not because we think we'll win. We can't. But because, fuck you." Davos laughed. The first genuine laugh I'd heard from him in centuries. "Fuck you," he agreed. "We're Raven Guard. We don't surrender, even when surrender is the logical choice, even when resistance is futile. We resist, because that's what we are." The Patriarch's expression shifted through several emotions I couldn't identify. "You choose the hard path, the path of maximum suffering." "Why?" "Because it's our choice," I said. "The only real choice we have left. You can transform our bodies, corrupt our armor, distort our perception of time and reality, but you can't make us choose surrender. That's ours." For a long moment, the Patriarch was silent. Then it smiled, genuinely smiled, with something that might have been respect. "Very well, students, continue your lesson. Wander my corridors for another 1,000 years. Another 1,000,000, I'll wait. I have eternity, and so do you. Eventually, even your spite will erode. Eventually, you'll accept the inevitable. But until then..." It gestured, and the chamber's walls closed in. "Enjoy your damnation." We were ejected back into the corridors, back into the endless wandering, back into the recursion and horror and temporal distortion. But something had changed. We'd made a choice, a real choice, and that choice had given us something we'd lost centuries ago. Agency. We were still trapped, still damned, still being slowly absorbed into the ship's corrupted consciousness. But we were choosing how we faced that damnation. And that made all the difference. I've stopped trying to track time. The marks covering every surface of my armor have layered over themselves so many times they've become abstract patterns. My armor's chrono displays only error symbols. The books chronicling my existence have grown to volumes that would fill libraries, and new pages write themselves with observations I'm making right now, creating perfect recursive documentation. Davos disappeared 3,000 years ago, or yesterday, or he's still with me, and I've forgotten how to perceive him. Time and memory have become too fluid to maintain clear narratives. I remember his last words: "I'm going to find the center again, going to take the Patriarch's offer." I'm sorry, brother. I can't do this anymore. I don't blame him. After millennia of wandering, acceptance is rational, surrender is sane. But I keep walking, keep exploring the infinite corridors of the ship organism that was once the Nightfall's Talon, keep resisting integration even as my body completes its transformation into something that barely resembles anything human or Astartes. I've become a hybrid of flesh and weapon and ship and warp stuff. My left arm is a cannon that fires my own transformed blood. My right arm has become tentacles that can phase through dimensions. My torso is covered in eyes that see timelines simultaneously. My legs have fused into a serpentine tail that allows me to traverse impossible geometries. I am monstrous, abominable, corrupted beyond anything the Inquisition would recognize as salvageable. But I am still Corvus, still Brother Corvus of the Raven Guard, 4th Company, Tactical Squad Umbra. I repeat this to myself constantly, because memory erodes, because the Patriarch's consciousness presses against mine, trying to absorb my thoughts, integrate my experiences into its vast awareness. I resist by holding on to the smallest details. My recruitment at age 12 from the prison hives of deliverance. My first combat deployment against Orc raiders in the Ghoul Stars. The face of Brother Sergeant Marius, who trained me, who died in most timelines during the initial warp incursion. These memories are my anchor, my proof that I was someone before I became this. I've met myself thousands of times over the millennia, versions from different timelines, different states of corruption, different degrees of integration with the ship. Some versions have surrendered completely, becoming thoughtless extensions of the Patriarch's will. They wander the corridors without awareness, automated processes given quasi-physical form. Some versions have transformed into something transcendent, beings of pure psychic energy that exist across all timelines simultaneously. They try to communicate insights they've gained, but their consciousness is so far beyond human, or post-human, that their messages are incomprehensible. Some versions are still fighting, still resisting, still clinging to identity despite millennia of erosion. We recognize each other, exchange brief acknowledgements, sometimes fight alongside each other against the demon things that hunt the corridors, then separate, each continuing our individual journeys through the labyrinth. One version I met had been wandering for subjective millions of years. His armor had become a shell housing a consciousness so vast and strange I couldn't communicate with it directly, but through the ship's psychic network I felt his message. It doesn't end, brother. The experiment has no conclusion. The lesson has no final exam. You wander forever, transforming incrementally, approaching but never reaching complete integration. The Patriarch sustains you in this liminal state eternally, because the transition is more interesting than the destination. You are becoming but never become. You are dying but never die. You are eternal in the worst possible way. Then he walked into a wall and vanished into whatever timeline he'd emerged from. I've found the bridge 10,000 times, give or take a few thousand. Each time, it's different. Sometimes Captain Shrike's corpses are fresh. Sometimes ancient. Sometimes he's alive and commanding the demon crew. Sometimes he's not there at all, and I find only empty thrones. Sometimes the bridge is underwater. Sometimes it's on fire with flames that burn cold. Sometimes it exists in negative space, an absence of reality shaped like a command deck. I've stopped trying to understand the bridge. It's a symbol. The place where my damnation began, repeated endlessly in variation, reminding me of the moment the Gila field failed and my death commenced. I've found my brothers in various states. Brother Cain exists as a psychic echo, a consciousness trapped in a moment of death, experiencing his killing repeatedly for eternity. Every time I encounter him, he's dying again, torn apart by demons, his screams fresh despite occurring thousands of years ago. Brother Marius has become a statue in a garden of statues, each one depicting a raven guard in their moment of death. He's aware. I can feel his consciousness when I approach, but cannot move, cannot speak, cannot do anything except exist as a monument to his own ending. Brother Hestian has transcended completely. He exists now as a principle rather than a person, the concept of acceptance made manifest. When I'm tempted to surrender, I feel his presence, gentle and patient, offering rest. I refuse every time. Brother Davos. I don't know what happened to Davos. I've searched for him across countless timelines, explored 1,000,000 corridors, interrogated 1,000 versions of the Patriarch. No one knows where he went. Maybe he achieved true escape. Maybe he found a version of death that stuck. Maybe he integrated so completely that his individual consciousness no longer exists. Or maybe he's still wandering, and we just exist in non-overlapping timelines now, two parallel journeys that will never intersect. I hope he found peace, whatever form that takes. I've fought demon things beyond counting. The ship spawns them constantly. Creatures born from the fusion of warp energy and the Nightfall's talons' corrupted machine spirit. Some are weak, easily destroyed with a thought or a strike from my transformed limbs. Some are powerful, requiring hours or days or years of combat to banish. Some are impossible to kill, reforming endlessly, pursuing me through a dozen timelines before finally losing interest. The fighting gives me purpose, gives me something to do besides wander, maintains the fiction that I'm still a warrior, still serving the Emperor in some incomprehensible way. I know it's a fiction. The Emperor is impossibly distant, 10,000 years removed in both time and reality. I've been corrupted beyond redemption. I fight demons with demon flesh, monster against monster. But the fiction comforts me. So, I maintain it. I've discovered chambers in the ship that contain impossible things. A room where gravity flows sideways, filled with water that burns. A chamber containing every book ever written, and every book that will be written, and every book that could be written in alternate timelines. A gallery of portraits, each one depicting me, each one showing a different moment of my existence across all timelines, simultaneously. A garden where the plants are made of crystallized screams, and the soil is compacted prayers that were never answered. A throne room where I sit as king of my own damnation, ruling over subjects who are all versions of myself from different timelines. A prison where I'm held captive by guards who are future me, preventing present me from advancing to their state of advanced corruption. A temple where I worship myself as a god of endurance, the one who refused to surrender despite infinite opportunity. All of these exist simultaneously. All of them are real. I visit them in rotation, though rotation implies sequence, and sequence implies time, and time has no meaning here. I've had conversations with the Patriarch spanning subjective centuries. It's patient, willing to discuss philosophy and theology and metaphysics for as long as I'm willing to engage. Through these conversations, I've learned things. The Nightfall's Talon didn't translate incompletely by accident. The warp targeted the ship specifically because of what we were. Space Marines, the Emperor's finest, enhanced warriors with extraordinary mental conditioning. We were perfect subjects for the experiment. The experiment's purpose, if purpose applies, is to understand resilience. How long can consciousness maintain coherent identity under absolute corruption? What are the limits of loyalty, faith, determination? At what point does resistance become indistinguishable from surrender? I am one of thousands of such experiments running simultaneously across the warp, other ships, other chapters, other warriors, all trapped in similar hells, all being studied by alien consciousnesses that exist beyond human categories of good and evil. You're not being punished, the Patriarch explained during one conversation. Punishment implies moral judgment. The warp doesn't judge, it explores. You're being explored. Your limits tested, your boundaries pushed, your essence examined from every possible angle. And when the exploration is complete, I asked? It's never complete. There are always new angles to examine, new timelines to explore, new variations to test. You exist in eternal study, infinitely analyzed, forever discovered and rediscovered. Yet when you discover something, your past discovers so swiftly does it seem by an odd yet natural character. That's torture. Only if you judge it as such. If you release judgment, it's simply experience, pure existence, untainted by concepts of pleasure or pain. I've tried to release judgment, tried to achieve the acceptance that Hestian found, the transcendence that some versions of myself have achieved. I can't. Some fundamental core of my identity refuses. Some fragment of the 12-year-old boy recruited from Deliverance. Some echo of the Space Marine who swore oaths to the Emperor. Some remnant of human stubbornness that won't die, no matter how many millennia I exist. So I keep wandering, keep fighting, keep resisting. Not because I think I'll escape, I won't. Not because I think I'll win, I can't. Not because I think it matters, it doesn't. I resist because I am Corvus, and resistance is what Corvus does. I've started to forget things, not the major events. I remember the Geller field failing, remember my brothers dying, remember the millennia of wandering. But smaller things slip away. The exact shade of the Raven Guard's armor, the precise words of the oaths I swore, the faces of people I knew before my recruitment. Each forgotten detail is a small death, a piece of my identity eroding, absorbed into the ship's vast consciousness. I fight to remember by carving the details into my armor, into the ship's walls, into the fabric of my corrupted flesh. I've covered every surface accessible to me with desperate documentation. Names, faces, dates, events, anything I can recall about who I was before. But the carvings fade, or change, or turn out to be details I've invented, false memories created to fill gaps. I'm losing the battle for my own history. The Patriarch watches this erosion with patient interest. You're approaching the threshold, the point where Corvus ends and I begin, where your individual consciousness becomes a node in my network. It's inevitable, brother, but I admire your resistance. It makes the transition more valuable. I want to hate the Patriarch, want to rage against it, fight it, destroy it. But it's not malevolent, it's not cruel, it's simply alien, operating according to principles I can't fully comprehend despite millennia of exposure. It's the warp made semi-coherent, reality's antithesis given voice. And I'm being absorbed into it inch by inch, thought by thought, memory by memory. I've found exit points, doors that lead back to real space, corridors that terminate in translucent barriers beyond which I can see stars, planets, normal space-time. Each time, I approach the exit, test it, confirm it's real. And each time, I can't go through. Not because the Patriarch prevents me, not because I'm physically unable, because I know, with certainty beyond logic, that stepping through the exit will just loop me back to the beginning. That real space itself is another chamber in the labyrinth. That escape is another room in the infinite prison. The Patriarch confirmed this when I asked. The exits are real, you could step through, but you'd find yourself back here eventually because here isn't a location, it's a state of being. You're not trapped in a ship, you're trapped in corruption. And corruption isn't bound by geography. So I don't take the exits. I continue wandering the ship because at least here I understand the rules. Here I know I'm damned. Out there I'd have false hope, and hope might be crueler than certain despair. I've met the Emperor, or something wearing his face. It's impossible to tell the difference in the warp. The figure appeared in a chamber of golden light, wearing the armor I'd seen in picked captures and devotional art. He spoke with a voice like thunder and compassion. "Brother Corvus, you've suffered long enough. Come to me. Let me gather your soul into my protection. You can rest." I wanted to believe, wanted to run to him and accept that embrace. But I've been in the warp too long. I know its tricks. "Prove you're the Emperor," I demanded. The figure smiled sadly. "In the warp, proof is impossible. I could perform miracles, speak prophecies, channel divine power, and all could be deception. You must choose, faith or doubt." "I choose doubt," I said, "because the Emperor would understand that faith, unsupported by evidence, is just wishful thinking, and he would respect a warrior who questioned rather than a fool who believed." The figure nodded approvingly. "Well reasoned, you're correct. I'm not the Emperor. I'm a projection, created by your own mind, offering the comfort you crave. But knowing that, will you still reject me? I could have accepted even a false comfort. After millennia of wandering, even a beautiful lie would have been welcome. But I said yes. I reject you, because accepting comfort from a lie is the first step toward accepting the bigger lie. That this damnation has meaning, that my suffering serves purpose, that I'm anything other than a curiosity being studied by alien intelligence. The figure faded, and I was alone again. I've lost count of how many years I've been wandering. The number exceeded my ability to track it centuries ago. My armor's deep logs show operational duration 9,847 years, 3 months, 12 days. Subject: operational direction 298 years, 7 months, 8 days. Adjective: operational duration. Error, time reference collapsed. Operation. All are true. I've been lost for 10 subjective millennia. The ship has been in the warp for 3 objective centuries. Time doesn't exist here. Time is all that exists here. I am ancient beyond ancient. I am still experiencing my first moments of damnation. I haven't been born yet. All simultaneously true. I've started to see the pattern. The wandering, the corruption, the recursion, the meeting of alternate selves. It's all a spiral. A logarithmic descent into some central point where all timelines converge. The patriarch is at that center. Or I am. Or we all are. Every version of every lost soul ever trapped in this ship, compressed into a singular consciousness that exists across all possibilities. I'm approaching that center asymptotically, getting closer with each subjective millennium but never quite arriving. Like Zeno's paradox made flesh, infinite steps remaining even as I traverse infinite distance. When I finally reach the center, if finally means anything, I'll undergo complete integration. I'll become the ship, or the patriarch, or a new consciousness born from the fusion of all the trapped minds. Or I'll discover the center is empty and the journey itself is the point. Or I'll find that I've always been at the center and the wandering was illusion. All possibilities exist. None are privileged over others. And I keep walking toward that center, because walking is what I do. Because I am Corvus, and Corvus endures. Bound Davos today, or 10,000 years ago, or tomorrow. He was standing in a corridor I'd traversed 1,000,000 times, but had never contained him before. He'd transformed completely. His entire body was weapons, no flesh visible, just integrated systems of destruction, held in humanoid configuration. He looked like war itself given form. "Corvus," he said, his voice emerging from speakers embedded in his chassis. "I've been waiting for you." "How long?" I asked. "Forever. And no time at all." I took the patriarch's offer, accepted integration, and in doing so, I gained perspective. I can see the timelines now. See where you've been, where you're going, see the center you're approaching. What's at the center? Lavos smiled. Somehow I could tell despite his lack of a face. You. The original you. The Corvus who first entered the ship when the Gellerfield failed. He's been sitting at the center the entire time. Everything since. The wandering, the corruption, the alternate selves. All of it has been his dying hallucination. The contents of his consciousness spreading out across subjective eternity in the instant of his death. The revelation should have devastated me. Instead, I laughed. Of course that's the answer. I'm a ghost haunting my own corpse, a death dream that's lasted 10,000 years. Does it change anything? Davros asked. I considered. Did it matter whether I was real or a dying hallucination? Whether my experiences were objectively occurring or just neurons firing in a corrupted brain? No, I said finally. I still walk, still resist, still maintain my identity against erosion, real or imagined. I'm still Corvus. Davos nodded. Then keep walking, brother. The center is waiting, and when you reach it, you'll understand everything. Or nothing. Both are true. He faded into the wall, and I was alone again. I've been walking for 10,000 years. I'll walk for 10,000 more, and 10,000 after that. Because I am Brother Corvus of the Raven Guard, and I do not surrender. The ship twists around me. The corridors reshape themselves. Time flows in impossible directions. I meet myself repeatedly in infinite variation, all of us lost together. But I keep walking. My armor is fused to my mutated flesh. My memories are fragmenting. My identity is eroding. I'm becoming something other than human, other than Astartes, other than anything with a name. But I keep walking. The Patriarch watches with patient interest. The warp studies me from infinite angles. My dying consciousness spreads across eternity, exploring every possible variation of its own damnation. But I keep walking, because I am Corvus. And walking is what Corvus does, forever.